August 4th. Good morning. This is the Transportation Committee meeting for the Sacramento Area Council of Governments meeting for August 4th. I'm calling the meeting to order, and just let you know that there will be opportunities for public comment during the course of the meeting on different topics that we have on our agenda specifically. And we do have one public hearing later this morning on item 7. But we will also have an open opportunity for public communications at the beginning on items not on our agenda. Let's see, Mr. Joyner, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I'd be happy to. If you all please stand, join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Paul.
You bet.
And
I think I heard a ding. Somebody's cookies are ready in the oven.
I've just disabled that. So that was a ding, and you dinged me on it too. So Lynette, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you, Chair Saylor. Just a quick announcement before we begin. For our committee members who are joining us in person, we appreciate you being here. And just a quick note about the microphones in front of you. You just need to push the button when the green light comes on. That means that you are ready to speak. You don't have to pick it up and hold it up to you. You can just leave it on the table there. And again, we ask our committee members participating remotely online that you please mute your devices when you're not speaking. I'll go ahead and take roll call now. Director Branscombe.
Here.
Gog. Absent. Ledesma for Guerrero.
Here.
Jennings.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Lozano. Absent. Sander.
Here.
Chenier.
Here.
Spokley.
Here.
Soon.
Here.
Vice Chair Bradford.
Here.
Vice Chair Desmond. Absent. Chair Saylor.
Here.
And ex officio member Fong for Benny Paul.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette. And this is now the opportunity for members of the public who'd like to address this committee on topics not on our agenda. Do we have anyone in the room, Lynette, who has indicated an interest in speaking to the committee?
We have no requests for public communications in the room.
Are there any online?
There are no raised hands.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we'll move on to our consent calendar. These are matters that are significant, but we think there will be consensus. We'll take a motion and then we'll see if there's public comment. Is there anything you'd like to remove from the staff table from consent at this point? Is there any director who'd like to remove anything from consent? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Bradford, go ahead.
I think I saw Chenier move and Bradford second. Is that accurate?
Sure.
Okay, very good. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Okay,
No, there's no public comment.
very good. You may call a roll, please.
Thank you. Director Branscombe.
Aye.
Gog. Absent. Ledesma for Guerrero.
Aye.
Jennings.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Lozano. Absent. Sander.
Aye.
Chenier.
Aye.
Spokley.
Yes.
Soon.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bradford.
Aye.
Vice Chair Desmond. Absent. And Chair Saylor.
Aye,
Thank you. Motion carries.
thank you. And now we'll move to item 7. This is the 2023 MTIP amendment number 2. It's and this we'll have a staff presentation and then the questions from the board committee and then a public hearing. So who will be presenting from staff table?
All right, I'm over at the podium. I don't know if the camera sees me, but
Okay.
so good morning, Renee Oki from your, wait, you see me now? Oh, wait, yeah, you do. All right, Renee Oki, I'm your Regional Air Quality Program Manager and coordinate the development of the Transportation Conformity document. So today I'm filling in on behalf of Jose Luis Cassidis, who is our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, or MTIP project manager. He's out on vacation. So the item today is a public hearing on both these documents that I just mentioned. And the MTIP, as well as the conformity, will be returning next month for your action. Before we open up for the public hearing, I'd like to just do a quick overview of the items as well as next steps. So a bit of background: the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, or the MTIP, is our short-term list of federally funded transportation projects in the SACOG region. And it contains transportation projects that also require analysis based upon their ability to impact air quality. The MTIP is essentially the first 4 years of our current MTP-SES, or the 2020 MTP-SES. So in alignment with all the other MPOs in the state, we adopt a new MTIP every 2 years. So the MTIP is done in conjunction with all project sponsors, and the projects that are contained in the 2023 MTIP do reflect funding decisions that have already been made by SACOG, as well as EDCTC, PCTPA, CTC, and other state bodies. The MTIP does allow you to see detail broken out on these projects in phases. So think environmental design, right-of-way construction, as well as costs for all those different years. So we solicited project update changes from your staff, looking at additions, changes, deletions, status changes. So a lot of work by our staff as well as your staff putting all these details together. The 2023 MTIP is also accompanied by amendment number 2 to the MTP-SES. Since really the MTIP is the first 4 years of the plan, this is kind of done to sync up the documents together. The MTIP is accompanied by our federal air quality conformity analysis. And so this is analysis that evaluates air quality impacts of the projects. And we look at our transportation model, and we made the determination that the proposed projects will not impede our ability to attain clean air on time. Our conformity document looks at criteria pollutants only. So ozone, PM10, PM2.5, these are our particulate matters. And we look at a variety of years and analyze those. Our analysis for this go around looked at about 7 years. So to the years 2023, 24, 26, 27, 33, and 35, as well as 2040. We have to look at a lot of impact years to make sure that nothing's going to impede our ability to achieve clean air. So the public comment period for these documents began on July 14th, and they will close on the 12th. So the public hearing is part of the process that we need to go through. Looking ahead to next steps, once we close the comment period, we'll be putting together a final document. It will be returning to this committee for action, as well as our regional planning partnership to look at our air quality conformity and subzones. Once there's action that's been taken by our board, it will go to Caltrans, where it then gets combined with all the other MTIPs in the state and circulate it for another 30 days. Then that whole document will be sent over to FHWA, who will finally take action in late December. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Renee. Colleagues, are there questions on this topic? I'm not seeing any hands raised. And is there anyone in the boardroom with questions?
Chris Branscombe does.
Excuse me, Mr. Branscombe?
Thank you, Chair. If you were to do an elevator description of what we're doing here, can you break it down? Are there headlines that drive home the main thrust of what's happening here?
These are your transportation projects that have been funded and are ready to go. And so by putting them in this document allows Caltrans to take action, as well as FHWA, so you can begin designing your projects or moving on to construction.
Okay, and the ones that are ready to go, is that just based on the progress they've made, or has there been some kind of down select? How's that done?
It's project schedule. Since we touch every project every 2 years, we're trying to make sure that the description of the project is accurate so that your staff can move forward with getting the project sent over to Caltrans so that they can issue what's called a authorization to proceed.
Thank you. I thought I knew the answer, but thank you for confirming that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you. And it's always a good question to ask. Appreciate it. Any other questions? All right, so I don't see any questions, so we'll open public hearing. This is a formal public hearing pursuant to the law that we conduct such a hearing on this topic. Is there any? It's now open. Are there any comments requested in the room?
Chair Saylor, there's no questions in the room.
Are there any questions or comments online on the Zoom call?
I don't see any
hands.
raised hands.
All right, very good. So we're ready for a motion if the committee is ready.
Branscombe moves.
Bradford will second.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Branscombe and a second from Bradford to move this forward. And we'll bring it back when the time period has passed. Please take the roll, Lynette.
Thank you. Director Branscombe,
Aye.
Gog, absent Ledesma for Guerrero,
Aye.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Aye.
Lozano, absent Sander,
He says aye.
thank you. Chenier,
Aye.
Spokley,
Yes.
Soon,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bradford,
Aye.
Vice Chair Desmond,
Aye.
and Chair Saylor.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to item 8, and Chris Doherty is here with us, and this is the Revolving Match Program Funding Awards.
Thank you, Director Saylor and Chair Saylor and members of the committee. Chris Doherty with the transportation team. The item before you this morning is the staff recommendations for the Revolving Match Program. In April of this year, Chicago board approved the guidelines in the budget for the Revolving Match Program. This 4-county program is designed to help our partner agencies better compete for state and federal funding programs, helping our region further implement local priorities and the MTP SCS. The board approved a range of budget for this program between 19 and 31 million over 2 years of the program. And this program is designed to be continually open, with awards being approved approximately every 6 months. This is the first round of this program, and we released a call for projects in May. We had applications due on July 1st. We had received 4 applications for this program. The first one from Capital Corridor for the Sacramento to Roseville third track phase, requesting $2 million to go towards the congestion corridors program, the statewide SB1 program. City of Sacramento for their Marysville Boulevard Vision Zero project. They're requesting $4 million. They're going after the Safe Streets for All program at the federal level. The City of West Sacramento is pursuing the I Street deck conversion project, which is and requesting $1.5 million as they pursue statewide active transportation funding. And the county, Sacramento County, is for the US 50 Gold Line corridor enhancements, which is improvements to the Hazel interchange and enhancements to the Socrates Gold Line low floor enhancement. And they're requesting $4 million to the program. Staff is at this time recommending that all projects move forward, be approved with this round of the program. This totals 11.5 million in possible funding. It is important to note that if these projects, as they apply for their larger federal and state programs, are not successful, those dollars do not get programmed to the project. They will then kind of go back into the pot for the next round. And if that project is applying again, they're available to apply again for if they're going to pursue other federal or state funding. Yeah, so at this point, staff is recommending that the Transportation Committee recommend to the board to adopt our funding recommendations for this round for the revolving match. And this concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions you have.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any questions? I see Mr. Desmond, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chris, I just want to thank you and staff for your work on this. I'm very happy about the award for the Hazel interchange and the improvements to the Gold Line. I think that's a really great project to increase accessibility to transit and efficiency of transit. So I want to thank you, and when the time is appropriate and after public comment, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of the item.
Okay, Mr. Ledesma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you as well, Chris, for the work on this. I know this goes back a ways for you because you're working in West Sacramento, but this is an important project, the I Street Street Bridge deck conversion. It's really a chance for active transportation to continue that and provide a walkway for that leads into Sacramento from one of our neediest areas in the north. So it's really a really important project, and appreciate the work on it.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Any other questions or comments from the board before we open to public comment? I don't, anybody in the room, if you want to say something and you're in the room, I can't see each of you individually. So just raise your voice so we can be sure that you get your chance to speak. Okay, let's open to public comment. Is there anybody who'd like to address the committee on this issue?
Chair Saylor, I don't see any raised hands.
Okay, this is, I'll just editorially say that this idea of providing this local match revolving fund is really a good move. It's a game changer for our local jurisdictions. I appreciate the testimony from Directors Ledesma and Desmond to tell us how important it is. And I just repeat the same thing for all four of those projects. This is an opportunity to leverage federal and state resources with an easy investment. So Mr. Desmond, you made the motion. Mr. Ledesma, would you like to second that?
If I can get my phone off mute, yes.
All right. So there we have a motion by Desmond, second by Ledesma. Please call the roll.
Thank you. Director Branscombe,
Aye.
Gog, absent. Ledesma for Guerrero,
Yes.
Jennings,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Lozano, absent. Sander,
Aye.
Chenier,
Aye.
Stokely,
Yes.
Soon,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bradford,
Aye.
Vice Chair Desmond,
Aye.
and Chair Saylor.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And do we have any other staff comments on this? Mr. Corliss, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Saylor. I know it's been a while since we all got together, and I appreciate what you just said about this being a game changer, but it's important to remember that the big plus up in the bipartisan infrastructure law was not a plus up in funding that necessarily flows down to the regional or local level. It's a lot of competitive grant programs. Right? And you all know that we've got numerous applications I know from the region in right now for the RAISE program that we're hoping to hear from USDOT any day. So part of the revolving match idea is to leverage funding that some of our local jurisdictions may not have readily available to go get that funding right at the federal level. So because if you also remember, as we get into the next cycles of the funding round here for the 4 counties, it's the budget is not as big as it was before for a number of reasons, but it will get bigger if we can use that leverage to go get the federal funds. And I also just want to mention, as our policy committee will talk about, big budget deal at the state level, a big plus up for transportation in the state budget, big plus up for active transportation program, big plus up for transit, the intercity rail. All of that is going to require us to be, even more on our game, but also making sure that we have those funds that are available to leverage the state funds as well as the federal funds. So this was a small thing, the first time out. I want to thank our staff and all of your staff for working on this, but we do think this is an idea. The revolving match, if you don't get the grants, right, goes back into the program. It gets used for future applications from our partners and jurisdictions. So just want to remind folks why this is important. It may seem like a small amount of money, but the leverage piece is what is so important.
Thank you, James, for that clarification and additional value. Thank you. Let's move to item 9. And this is Victoria Catchatory with her favorite project, the prioritization and regional trail network strategy.
Yes, thank you, Chair Saylor. And well, I guess I don't need to introduce myself now, but anyhow, this is Victoria Catchatory, the project manager for the Sacramento Region Trail Network. This is the last piece of the planning grant that was funded by Caltrans through a Sustainable Communities Planning Grant. And as it is the last piece, I think, oh wait, I noticed Director Jennings has his hand up.
Rick, did you want to speak before the presentation, or do you want?
I do not. I'll wait until after the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks. As it is proposed as the last piece, I wanted to do a quick recap of all we have done to get to this point, because it has been a rather lengthy process. These things don't come together overnight, not if we want them to stand the test of time. This started back in 2018 when we first acknowledged that there was going to be a really strong potential if we were able to do something with the almost 500 miles of trails that we did have on the ground in the region. We were able to find others that shared our interest, and SACOG was able to lead in securing grant funding to study what a regional trail plan could look like, or focused on how we could underscore the benefit of having access to parks and trails as a component of how we support healthy living in the region, not just physical health through an increased access to a place to have safe running, biking, walking, or just outdoor access, but also the mental health benefits that can go along with outdoor access. Caltrans Sustainable Communities grant was awarded to the project based on also the potential for looking at trip replacement through connected trails. And we were able to hit the ground running in winter of 2019, or well, fall of 2019 and into winter 2020, where we analyzed all of the local and regional plans related to trail access and trail planning that we could get our hands on, and then also checking those for alignment with state plans. Through these plans, we were able to identify the 6 foundational goals that it didn't matter if you are a small rural placer community or you are the city of Yuba City. We all held these things to be very important when we were talking about our active modes connections, how we can increase safe access, how we can enjoy the beautiful places of our region, how we can connect to the destinations that help the economic vitality of our region, and how we can make sure that we're doing so equitably. And unfortunately, when we were looking at what our existing trail access showed, we saw that we didn't have an equitable network. Access for people in lower income communities was 30% less than access for people in non-lower income communities. So we knew that we had our work cut out for us. We wanted to go the next step of connecting what we found in all of those local plans to what you could hear from just a person living in our region. And so with last spring, spring of 2021, we launched a public survey across the 6-county region and heard back from over 3,000 people about what the places they wanted to go to on trails were. And we found that there's a lot of interest for people wanting to use safe and comfortable trails to get to social gathering centers and the places that are unique to our region. And these are trips that today often involve a car trip because there is no safe way to get to these places. No way that a person feels okay taking their family out with them. And so with this finer lens on how we could define those goals around environmental justice, around health, around economic vitality, we worked with all of your local staff to identify a trail network that would help us achieve these goals in a way that was meaningful to our region. And after a first draft that we released in December of 2021, we were able to fill in most of the remaining gaps to the final network that was approved earlier this year by you. We're able to leverage about or almost 300 miles of the existing trails, ones that have that extra potential to cross barriers and jurisdictional boundaries, and to form a regionally representative network of trails that access the rivers, the waterways, the mountains, and regionally significant parks. We're also able to elevate about 560 miles of planned trails from local planning documents that are going to help make the connections that people want to make. And then lastly, we had a little over 300 miles of study corridors where these are either trail projects that have some known challenges to their implementation, or there's a corridor of interest that was identified by local staff to help make the connections that needed to be made. Includes 50 miles of planned separated bikeways, so class 4 connections that help us reach some communities that otherwise we would not be able to reach with trails because there are no potential corridors for them. And with this network, we'd look at adding access for 406,000 people that don't have access to connecting trails today. And when we also factor in the 7 locally identified study areas, there's potential to add access for an additional 30,000 people. It more than doubles the access to recreational assets in our region. It connects to job hubs and community gathering places across all 6 counties, provides over 100 miles of all ages and abilities alternatives to high-stress roadways, and would also add 60 miles of trail alternatives to unsafe roads where there are documented high collisions. And it also would bring down that inequitable trail access gap I mentioned to within 1%. At the same time that you approved the full network, you approved a prioritization strategy that looked at the qualitative benefits of trails. Qualitative in large part due to not all of these have been have gone through a full local vetting process, and then also for the nature of identifying a regional vision, qualitative was really the appropriate measure to take. So projects were first evaluated based on their project performance potential, so how they could move our region closer to the plan goals identified through the trail network. 70% of the project weight was based on realizing plan goals, and then 30% of the plan or the prioritization weight was based on regionalism. So a trail's potential to cross jurisdictional boundaries and other barriers, how it could fill in small gaps between existing trails, thus creating a stronger regional asset, and how it would create access to destinations like job centers, but also fill in these gaps, connecting communities that are really hard to fill. After projects were based on the performance potential, then looked at their readiness to move forward. At the staff level, we drafted responses based on both the regionalism metrics and the readiness assessment. We shared those draft responses with local agencies to receive any corrections to our first draft, and then incorporated those corrections into the attachments that you see before you with the different phasing. And then after we're able to look at both the performance potential and then the readiness assessment, we grouped projects into different years for the action plan. Because if there's one thing that we have in finite capacity, it is the staff ability to work on an entire trail network across all 6 counties at once, and to provide something that's meaningful to each of those segments based on their needs. And that brings us to the new intel before you today. So the proposed prioritization and the strategies that are shared to accompany them. So as I mentioned, we worked with cities and counties, and then also our other invested partners that have been part of this planning effort for the whole time, and gave them the first blush look at the strategies before they were released for public input. Cities and counties provided us really useful input on different funding needs and how regional strategies could help inform those. So we have some recommendations that are specific to how SACOG can provide a regional voice for the need for more funding, not only for constructing trails, but also maintaining trails. And we also heard from many of our partners about an interest in how trails can provide a safe experience, and how it's also important for the local communities to still have their voice and how a trail looks to serve their needs. We released all of this information for public comment starting on July 1st and had the document out and receiving input through July 20th, which also served as additional time for any of our local agencies, so your local staff, to comment on the strategies proposed and seek clarification on a lot of the tiers and what they served as. And this was a way for us to document the work that SACOG staff has been working on with you and with our partners over the last 3 years. And that'll also serve as a way that we can look back at this planning process to retrace our steps for future updates to the trail plan. So I think it's important to lead with, we need the complete network to deliver the envisioned benefits that that I described earlier, to increase access to 406,000 people that don't have access to trails today, to eliminate that inequitable gap in access. We need the whole network to get there. And that is why there are some strategies that are offered to any and all trails and study corridors within the network. And that is how SACOG could lead coordination efforts, both for cross-jurisdictional projects, and then also to serve as an easy point of reference for Caltrans coordination, since we get to work with Caltrans frequently, to assist in any coordination with Union Pacific in any ways that we're able to, and other federal and state agencies that often have some sort of involvement with these connecting trails, as maybe an area crosses Bureau of Land Management, or it crosses like other federally managed waterways. I also felt that it would be a natural fit for us to serve as a convener for sharing trail project ideas and updates, and to bring everyone together for how we're advancing the trail network and what different status, or how different people can plug into different points of moving the projects forward. I also wanted to help in execute a focus campaign on the regional trail network, which we've already set out on, which is gathering a lot of attention from people who maybe don't follow their like the specifics of all these, but they see that the regional trail network is something they want, and they know that it'll eventually get around to this whole region, and they're really excited about the possibility of being able to travel across the region, either by bike or to just explore different areas that they didn't know that they would be able to get to by walking or biking. And then I think one of the things that people most strongly identify with SACOG is grant assistance. So how we're able to keep track of upcoming opportunities for people, provide a really easy point of reference. This is especially useful for our smaller agencies that maybe don't have the staff dedicated to tracking upcoming grants and doing that matchmaking exercise to figure out how a project might compete. And then also how we can support funding application development, including letters of support, application review, and other programs that we can identify specific to each funding program. So when we're talking about how we would focus our regional coordination efforts, because we can't provide project specific assistance to every single project within the network, or acknowledging that the capacity is the real constraint for regional coordination, and that there are some things that if we're not able to offer these, some of these projects will continue to not move forward because they are very complicated, or there may not be a capacity on staff to help move them forward. And like for those, we're looking at for the first couple of years within trail plan implementation, we would focus on tier 1 trail projects and top tier study corridors. If you'll remember, the study corridors were some of those projects that still have a lot more question marks around them, and in many instances, they need to be incorporated into local plans before they can move forward. But when we're talking about what the more focused regional coordination is, we would propose using some of our data and analysis tools to support projects and to discuss the benefits specific to that project. Work with partners to identify joint funding opportunities for projects that are in similar development stages or sharing geographic agency or geographic boundaries, and to assist with identifying potential partners and groups that agencies should contact early in the trail planning process, and then also serving for how we can incorporate this regional trail plan into all of the other SACOG work that we do and help present this as part of the regional strategy that we're moving forward. Let's see. And I think that that is the recap of what is in front of you today. And the request is that the Transportation Committee recommend that the board approve the prioritization to complete the strategic development plan for the Sacramento Region Trail Network. And with that, we'll take any questions.
And thank you. So the recommendation is, and I'll use Mr. Branscom's phrasing, could you give us the elevator recommendation? I think you just did, but if you just tell us exactly what would happen if we say yes.
Exactly what would happen if you say yes. So the recommendation for the prioritization and strategies would move forward to the board. SACOG staff would start working on all of those actions that we identified to help move the full network forward, and then also the focus strategies for tier 1 projects.
Okay, thank you. Director Jennings, you have your hand up.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Victoria, thanks for the presentation. I thought you did a great job. And I've just got a couple of questions. And my way of asking a question is, explain this to me as if I were a third grader, so that it can be clear and I can get it. And I really want to make sure I understand the focus of the tier system, and not only me understanding it and my colleagues who are on this call, but the public as well. The focus of the tier system and what that does, being 1, 2, or 3.
So the focus of the tier system is to help SACOG focus our coordination efforts, because we know that not all of these projects are going to be able to move forward without a helping hand. Mm-hmm. There are some agencies in the region that are quite adept at moving or like working with different partners to get across a very tough finish line. We have some outstanding projects that have been delivered, I would say almost against the odds, but local agency staff persevered. So it's identifying how SACOG can focus our efforts to help move those projects forward, and also to provide there's the broad support for all projects that are included in there, since not every project does need SACOG assistance on the coordination role. I do want to call out that the coordination, the tiers, the prioritization, that is separate from any specific funding recommendation. Mm-hmm. And even though I'll use the regional ATP or Regional Active Transportation Program as an example. Earlier this year, the board approved the Regional Active Transportation Program framework, which identified 5 points for if a project was implementing the regional trail plan. And it didn't identify whether it was specific to tier 1 projects, tier 2, or tier 3. And that was by design. But also we cannot look exclusively to regional ATP to implement the regional trail network, because if we were to do that, it would take more than 60 cycles to fund the full trail network. And full disclosure, I used our normal ATP estimate, so the 17.3 million. Since this upcoming round, James will have more on this, it has a higher estimate because of a one-time plus up. But over 60 cycles to implement the regional trail network. So prioritization is not tied to SACOG funding, because we know that SACOG funding is not enough. But I hope that partially addresses, or I hope that fully addresses your question, that the prioritization is to help us focus staff energy and coordination.
Okay,
And
so I just to clarify the question for me, the tier 1, I see the slide that you presented, and it shows the timeline of implementation, and then tier 2 kind of goes to 2026, and tier 3 looks like it goes to 2031. So if that's the case, if that's the implementation schedule with modifications as we go through time, is it possible for a jurisdiction to be able to move from one tier to another tier in order to move their project faster? If they can, is there still time for them to be able to do that?
There are different ways that the prioritization would shift, and not just from other projects being completed and then like getting out of the way for projects that are in the next tier. There could be something like if you have an infill housing situation, that would be one where if you weren't adding trails for people that didn't have it already, that would be one way. Or say identification of new destinations. Other ways that projects can move up on that is we had the regional measures of, is a trail gap filling or not? So as new trails come online, that creates, sadly, that creates new gaps sadly and fortunately, because you are getting new trails online, but it's creating new opportunities to do like the one last piece of the puzzle, and that can help projects raise in their prioritization. I guess other kind of unfortunate ways in which a project might also raise in prioritization is if you have a surge in crashes on a parallel roadway. If a trail is then providing a safe alternative to a high crash roadway, then that would move it up in the prioritization. So yes, I hope, please let me know if you have further questions on that.
Okay.
Director Jennings, can I try to, because I appreciate Victoria's explanation, and I know trying to simplify this. Whenever you see tiers, right, you worry, why am I not in tier 1? Or if I'm in tier 3, does that mean I'll never be funded ever, right? And so I just want to, from Victoria's description, this is not a funding set of, the tiers are not about funding priority, okay? I want to be very clear. And I know we had this actually really good, healthy discussion a couple of board cycles ago on this, and Director Soon raised some issues and concerns and questions, right? The tiers right now are, which are the trail segments in the whole network that have some regional benefit, but have some challenges. And in our limited staff time and Victoria's limited staff time, who could we help? Who do we need to help that needs us of an extra push? I know for many of you that might have tier 2 or tier 3 segments, that's not about funding priority. That's about, we know it's a priority for you. We want to help. We will absolutely help anybody who wants help on going to get funding, right? Victoria mentioned 60 cycles. of our regional program to build this out, that is 50 cycles too many, right? We want to accelerate this. We want to build it. We want to go win the state and federal funding. And if you're in locally, we're here to help you on the funding side. But there's some additional really complex challenges for those ones up in tier 1 that we wanted to highlight those for a lot of the technical assistance that we think is needed. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So my last question, then I'll give up the mic. I heard that we were accepting public comment from July 1st to July 20th. Is there any opportunity for the public to provide feedback between now and our board meeting?
I think that if there was something that needed to be provided, we would work to incorporate it and could share any updates out at the board.
Okay. But maybe between now and the board meeting, if they wanted to contact, would they contact you, Victoria, or what
Yes.
direction should we give them? Contact you?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm good.
Okay, thank you. I see, Mr. Joyner, your hand was up and it's down, so I'm assuming that your question was asked and answered.
I'm probably still sorting through my question a little bit, Don. So
Okay,
go ahead and go to Darren.
okay, Darren, and then Director Sander after that. So Mr. Soon.
Hey, thank you, Chair Saylor. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly just thank Victoria and all the staff at SACOG for all the work that's gone into this. I've been hearing just coincidentally from residents around town about the need for trails, and they'd like to see more trails connecting our region. And so I know there's a lot of complexity, as Director Jennings was asking about, and James was answering. But this network, this huge over 400-mile network, is going to be complex to implement. But I'm just glad to see it going forward. And I know that together, it'll take some time, but together we'll get this thing built, and all our entire region will get to enjoy it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. David?
This is a really exciting project. We've been trying to push through trails into existing neighborhoods in Rancho Cordova, and it is enormously challenging. In one case, we followed an old rail alignment. It had a bridge over Highway 50, which made it very attractive. It connected with light rail on one end. Neighbors who backed up to that corridor, long existing rail corridor, were certainly resistant, but we were able to win them over. In other cases, we've done class 4 bike trails on streets, where you basically go on a pavement diet or street diet. You create a protected lane on one side with barriers. You narrow the lanes to slow traffic down. Been very effective from a traffic safety point of view and adding those trails, but the neighborhoods just absolutely hate them when they go in. And there's building opposition against doing that elsewhere in Rancho Cordova as an example. And then our final option for these existing neighborhoods is old drainage ways, because we're a relatively new city. We inherited these old drainage ways. They're big V-shaped concrete trenches with access roads on the side. You could not easily, you could deck those over and create quite a nice wide greenway through a neighborhood. But it's very easy to scare the neighbors to death about what's going to happen behind their house if that's open. Now, the reality is it's happening now because it's closed off and people can camp back there, do whatever they're going to do back there behind your house. Adding cyclists and pedestrians back there presumably would make it safer, but that's not the scary thing that people hear. So, psychologically, it's a real barrier trying to get older established neighborhoods to accept these bike trails, even though in abstract, everybody wants them. It's a really interesting dynamic. So my concern is, how do we get these into all these old neighborhoods? How do we take advantage of the opportunities we have in these old neighborhoods? I think those strategies are going to be key for the region to think about, because if it's this hard for us, and we don't really have a financial barrier to doing them, if it's this hard for us, how much harder is it going to be for another jurisdiction like, say, Sacramento County, trying to address their massive amount of old suburban neighborhood and trying to figure out how to amenitize it and make it healthier and better with this sort of facility. I think that's something that's worthy of a lot of sort of SACOG thought and collaboration among our jurisdictions.
It's not a simple answer. It's more of, let's plant this topic and have it be part of our consideration in the time to come. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, that's it. This has got to be an ongoing sort of active effort. And there's also, we've talked about this before, I wasn't going to mention it, but there's these cross jurisdictional things, where we bump up against the county and then the county bumps up against city of Sacramento. And with this project really going to allow us to hopefully get our act together about what those connections look like across jurisdictional lines, because otherwise we all just tend to plan internally.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, I'll jump in, even though I suspect I know the answer to this one already. I'm just curious for those of us in more rural areas, such as Placer County, in implementation, is SACOG going to award equal points to on the ATP regional grant program for those trails that may be more recreational in nature as opposed to those connecting job centers, that type of thing? Which is, if my observation's been correct, which is what we've seen in the past, is those connections of job centers rather than the recreational type of trails that I might see in my jurisdiction. So we'd be awarding equal points for those types of programs or not?
Based on what I have seen in the scoring rubric, it's the same points for the 5 points that are identified for regional trail network implementation. So that's the scoring rubric is on the SACOG website along with the regional ATP application. It could only really speak specific to that scoring rubric or specific to that question within the framing of this item.
Okay. Well, I don't have it in front of me right now, but just just generally speaking.
5 points.
What was that?
5 points if for implementing the regional trail network, regardless of tier, regardless of the other connections within there. That is how it was how it was developed for this cycle. Any further questions, I would need to defer to Dustin Foster, who's leading it, but who's also not in this meeting. My apologies.
Hey, Director Joyner, sorry, this is James. Maybe what we could do, Victoria, because I do remember that framework came through the board recently, and we had this very active discussion, certainly among staff. I know a lot of agencies, and we've heard this concern, right? It's the utilitarian versus recreational, right? So if we could at least just, can we push out the ATP framework just so you all see it? Because I do think one thing that's happened, Director Joyner, I would say, I think the trail network is a way to enhance a lot of these connections and trails, and B, I think the distinction between a utilitarian trip and a recreational trip has begun to blur, right, for all kinds of reasons. So it's not so much, commuting downtown, right, because of what's happened under the pandemic and everything else. So I do remember this conversation, but without getting into the details and without having some of our staff here who worked on this, let's make sure we just can share those guidelines. And obviously, as you know, we and Victoria are available for follow-up questions too.
Right. So I understand that for most of you, those recreational and connecting trips are beginning to blur. For a community like mine, where the only logical trails are more recreational. There's not going to be a bicycle trail, the 12 miles from Lincoln to Roseville, that's used as a commuter type of trail by many, and there might be a few. But so it's going to be primarily a recreational type of use and connector for those of us out here. So I appreciate the information. Get it to us if you can. And thank you.
Okay, very good. I don't see any other board members' hands for questions.
Director
comments.
Branscombe, Chair Saylor.
Okay, thank you. Chris, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. 2 quick questions. Before I get into them, I want to congratulate you or thank you, Ms. Catchatory. That was an excellent presentation. The discussion of the criteria leading to your decision-making was perfect. I understood it all, and it made a lot of sense and made me comfortable with what you're presenting. First question is, are you accumulating data on the, well, it's said that any network, the value of any network is a direct function of the number of nodes attached to that network. So you are engaging additional nodes, be they individual people or residences or business locations, community locations, retail, what have you. Are you collecting data on the additional nodes that are attached in your work? Because it is a function of the, and one node might be valuing a recreational facility, for example. But some value data, I think, would be really interesting to see in measuring the impact of your planning. That's one question. And the second one, I'll give them to you both, and you can, if you want to just say, I'll talk to you later, that'll be fine. The second is that I'm thinking in terms of last mile, and last mile is used in communications a lot. And for example, this afternoon, I'll be going to the Costco in Roseville. I wouldn't dare try to approach that thing by active transportation. In fact, I'm sometimes afraid getting there by automobile. There's so many cars. Are there some long-term, is there some long-term thinking in your planning for active transportation to gain access to locations that are a challenge? And I'm just using that one example as probably a real challenge in getting access to with active transportation. Thank you.
Okay, so for the connections that are identified in the trail network, they're largely, they're mostly lifted up from local plans. So it is somewhat reliant on the local agencies to identify, for the example that you had listed, how does a person get to the Costco on bike or on foot? And what does that access look like for them? Are they going to be able to do it with a trail connection or a dedicated class 4? How do they do that? So I think that we don't have a long-term strategy for saying that Roseville needs to identify the access to those locations, but we are supportive of how Roseville goes about identifying those through their local planning processes. And we hope to provide the input, ideally being invited as a partner for these local efforts, as some of our agencies already do, inviting us to talk about how their locally driven active transportation plans can then help support the outcomes identified in the trail plan or accessing difficult to reach destinations. That said, I think that we do have a couple of different places that we had tried to reach through the regional trail plan, but we're not quite able to get there to them. I think the one that stands out where we just weren't able to find a solution that made sense there, and there wasn't a clear path forward for how to get there by trail or by dedicated active modes facility, would be Hidden Falls Regional Park in Placer County. The roads leading there are very narrow, but it might be that they just need a different type of solution and that it's not going to be a trail. Something that City of Auburn has done before was running a shuttle service to the confluence point, so people could start in Auburn and then take a shuttle out there on the weekends during the peak visitation season. And maybe something like that would work for Hidden Falls as well, because we weren't able to. But that aside, that's an example of a place where we would hope to continue keeping that on the radar for working with Placer County to see, like, is there some way that we might be able to get there by trail? What are the other places and the types of destinations highlighted, the goals identified through the regional trail network that, like, the next iteration of Roseville's planning or Marysville's planning would help get us even closer, and those connections that they identify in their local plans could be amended into the regional trail network in a future update.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think what I'm really thinking about, and you're touching on it, and you don't need to go any deeper, is what are the what's the scope, in its broadest terms, the ultimate scope? How far would you go? I mean, are you going to be looking to merge with other transport networks, be they rapid transit or what have you, or do you, what are the limits of the trail systems that you're thinking about? How far do you want to reach, and how ambitious in terms of distance and scope are you thinking? And I think you made a good answer to that, and I appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Director Branscombe. I don't see other hands from the board. Are there any public comments on this before we ask for a motion?
Chair Saylor, I don't see any raised hands.
Okay. Okay. Are you confident and ready to make a motion? Any member of the committee?
I'll move the staff's recommendation.
Thank you, Director Soon. Is there a second?
Bradford will second.
Thank you, Gary. So we have a motion by Soon and second by Bradford to move the prioritization and phasing strategy forward to the board for an August meeting. Please call the roll.
Thank you, Director Branscombe.
Aye, and thanks again for the presentation.
Gog. Absent. Ledesma for Guerrero.
Aye.
Jennings.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Lozano.
Yes,
Absent. Oh,
yes, and I apologize for my tardiness.
that's okay. Thank you. I'll make sure the record shows that you're here and you voted yes. Thank you. Director Sander.
Aye.
Chenier.
Aye.
Spokley.
Yes.
Thune.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bradford.
Aye.
Vice Chair Desmond.
Aye.
And Chair Saylor.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Very good. Thank you. And now we'll move to item. Those were our action items. We have 3 informational topics on our agenda for today. And the first one is an update on the Citizens Transportation Tax Initiative in Sacramento County. This is item 10, and Mr. Corliss is listed as our presenter.
Very good. Thank you, Chair Saylor, and committee members. As you said, this is an action item. Information item, as you just said, information. I do want to start by just, for some of you, introducing the attorney who's been helping us to finalize this MOU, who's been incredibly helpful, Mike Maurer from Best and Krieger. Mike is on the line here and is certainly ready to answer any questions. So it's not a long presentation, but there's probably a lot of information in here that's just important to understand. So a bit of a status update and a bit of review. As you'll remember, back in the May SACOG board meeting, your May board meeting, staff produced an analysis of the proposed Citizens Transportation Tax Initiative and flagged and highlighted a number of the risks in there, particularly around the projects that were included in the initiative, but were not included as part of the long-range 6-county regional transportation plan. In early June, we worked with a number of parties to develop a draft term sheet that was intended to address those risks and to manage and mitigate them. We brought that term sheet to the June SACOG board. You took action to approve the term sheet. You delegated authority for me to sign an MOU consistent with the term sheet. Part of that motion, you had 4 of your chairs, Chair Jennings and the committee chairs, Saylor, Kozlowski, and Siragosa, as key members to be consulted through that process since the June board meeting. And in addition, you requested the other 3 counties not represented under those committee chairs to also have individual board members who would be consulted, informed, and brought along. And those were Director Burris from Placer County, Director Bradford, Yuba County, Director Harris in Sutter County. Last week, the STA board, I'm going to go back to some details on this because there was a lot of work in the month of July, but last week the STA board approved the MOU. We finalized it. We signed it late last week. The MOU is in your packet. It is now signed. And among the next steps that I will also end on is because there is still more work to do here, but the important piece of this is that the Committee for Better Sacramento, the initial proponents, need to finalize their ballot argument in the coming days and reference the MOU in that ballot argument. Next slide, please. I want to back up as well and just anticipate perhaps some questions from all of you. The important thing here, given that this is a citizens initiative, the initiative that was drafted, the language finalized, and by the way, the signatures have been verified, and this is heading to the ballot for the November 8th election. But in the initiative itself, it's very important, and I'm sure Mike can answer questions on this, but there is already language that pertains to this issue. There is already language in the initiative that will be in front of voters. Sections J and K are there for your reference, but that reference projects that are not planned or programmed for construction in the current MTP, the need to meet the applicable regional greenhouse gas reduction target, and the need for parties to mitigate so we can maintain adherence to the greenhouse gas reduction target. So that's the language in the underlying initiative. And importantly, what the MOU tries to do is clarify that language to set up a process to provide more specifics about how that will work. Next slide, please.
James, can I actually interrupt right there and just make one comment on that slide?
Sure.
So this is Mike for everyone. I apologize. One thing I wanted to point out on that prior slide is it refers to the MTP, but within the initiative itself, it defines MTP as the MTP/SCS. So effectively, when we're referring to the MTP here in this slide, that's not just the MTP, it's referring to the MTP and SCS, which I think is an important detail to note. So thank you, James.
Yeah, sure. And I know we're violating every acronym rule possible here by throwing lots of technical terms at you, but the SES, Sustainable Community Strategy, as a reminder, is important because that is, the SCS is where the state requirement for reducing greenhouse gas emissions are met. Okay. So just a couple more slides here, but again, there's quite a bit in here. So the MOU clarifies, as I said earlier, that in the existing initiative, in the underlying initiative that will be on the ballot, will go to voters, we're clarifying those sections J and K in particular. SACOG and STA executed the MOU as parties. The Committee for Better Sacramento, the initial proponent, signed and confirmed to approve, which is really important. And I want to also reference there, the one thing that I'm going to anticipate you have questions on is the other party that was named in the term sheet was the Capital Southeast Connector JPA. They are not on at the moment as a party to this. We'll come back to our discussions. We've been in discussion about them taking this up, but we also, the MOU, unlike the term sheet, gets very specific about the fact that the project itself is covered. And so we believe that the way the MOU is now constructed, it basically takes care of, it clarifies that the project that the JPA is advancing is indeed subject to the MOU and the mitigation requirements. So not the only project, because as I said earlier, as our analysis showed, there was at least 26 projects that are not included for construction in the region's long-range plan, MTP-SCS. We say in the recitals, and so recital E is actually very important, that those certain, there's Caltrans projects and portions of the Capital South. Some of the Capital Southeast Connector is in the MTP-SCS for construction, namely the end segments, as we typically call them, Cameron Road and White Rock Road, but there's a middle portion that is not in for construction. I use the term here, and I'm going to anticipate another question, direct allocations for Sacramento Regional Transit and the Southeast Connector JPA. And I should revise that to say monthly allocations. Per the language of the initiative, it refers to monthly allocations for those two agencies, Sacramento Regional Transit and the Southeast Connector JPA. And I've had some questions about, well, if there's direct, or in this case, again, really the phrase in the initiative monthly allocations, what good is an MOU if these monthly allocations are going to those agencies? And in a lot of communication at work with the Sacramento Transportation Authority, STA, and their executive director, Kevin Busey, it's important to understand that the revenue is generated and collected by STA. STA has to actually get capital improvement programs from each of the project sponsors. They have to approve those before money is distributed, before funds are distributed. So STA has a very important role in this. Even if there are monthly allocations, they're accumulated, but the STA, again, a very important reason for them to be a party and for us to have been working with them very closely the last 3 weeks on the MOU. So all of that runs through the STA. And so the MOU applies even when we have some language in the underlying initiative around monthly allocations for those two agencies. So as you have seen too, and again, I want to just make sure you've seen the MOU in your packets. That is the MOU that was executed and signed. STA will fund SACOG and third-party analysis of the expenditure plan. The project's not included in the MTP SES. That was the topic of a lot of conversation we had and you had at the board meeting in June. And I believe that that language remains true through the MOU, as you'll see, and one that has gotten some questions and did last week as well. But I want to highlight it here. STA and the project sponsors will follow SACOG's recommendations. That's very important. It's part of the MOU. It's part of the term sheet. I think we've actually clarified that process and how it works. If there is significant deviation from the third-party analysis, because the third party will be hired, the parties will meet and confer. So I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that, but of course, we're always happy to do that. And if the third party finds things that frankly, we had missed, or there is significant deviation, we are always open, showing our work, sitting down and meeting, understanding how somebody might have arrived at a different answer. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if any of this is to actually make sense, we are the only agency that has to follow the greenhouse gas reduction statute under SB 375. And so we have to be in alignment, and project sponsors have to follow the recommendations around greenhouse gas reduction mitigation. So next slide. Next steps. I mentioned a ballot argument. That is the next key step here, happening in a matter of days. It is really important that that ballot argument, the yes argument from the Committee for a Better Sacramento, reference the MOU. Following that, STA and the Committee for Better Sacramento are going to be requesting local resolutions. If you remember those mitigation funds, that is the possibility of excess funds, the priority of those excess funds to go to mitigation. It is not a guarantee, but it is spelled out here. And importantly, the MOU, we also, I believe we clarified that if those mitigation funds don't materialize, the requirement for mitigation is still in effect. So we will be issuing a statement on the MOU itself. And I want to be very clear here. We are, as you know, we are not taking a position, nor am I recommending a position on the initiative itself, but we'll be issuing a statement next week, and we'll work with our policy committee who oversees a lot of our communications on that statement on the MOU. And then we will work collaboratively between STA and SACOG in particular to develop an implementation scope, budget, and schedule. And that will be coming back to the STA board, sorry, to the SACOG board. But I want to say, as I said to the STA board last week, a lot of this is going to rest on a really good working relationship and a partnership with STA. And we already have had that with STA. We have new leadership over there who we're very excited about, but this really does require a very strong, good faith partnership between our two agencies. And I believe we are both committed to doing that. So with that, that concludes my presentation on the information item. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, James. Our colleagues, are there questions or comments regarding this information item? Anybody have a question?
I just want to thank James for our ongoing work on this. He and I have been in a lot of communication the past several months on this topic. I think it's been fruitful and good. I happen to be chair of that Southeast Connector JPA. It's frankly not a major assignment from our city's point of view, but we're one of the parties engaged in that, along with the city of Elk Grove, city of Folsom, El Dorado County, and Sacramento County. And we take turns chairing it. This is my year, so it's been an interesting and eventful year. And I want to thank James for the work on that. I do think this measure is our best and greatest hope for necessary transportation funding for Sacramento County. We all know we've got deficits in this, even with recent success in the state budget, even with recent successes in federal funding. Our actual need, as measured by our agencies, is far greater than those even most optimistic results from us from a grant getting point of view. So measures like this, local measures like this, I think are necessary to actually build and maintain what we need and what we have. So with that, thank you, James. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, David. Do you anticipate the connector JPA will be considering signing on to these agreements later in the month?
I don't perceive any resistance among the board members at all to the agreement, none. But there is a technical difficulty. And so I can't, it's a closed session item. I can't really discuss that further. Unfortunately, I think other agencies, if they'd been asked to sign, other recipient agencies might have the same technical difficulty, as my understanding of it. But again, we're local elected officials from all these local jurisdictions. The funding agency itself is STA. The connector or any other recipient agency can't unilaterally decide, how to spend funds without dealing with STA as the parent. And this MOU deals with the control of the money through that parent. So I think, from a regional point of view, completely separated from any JPA stuff, there's a lot of protection here for the region and how we can move forward with transportation projects.
And you think the board supports the MOU more than likely?
Yeah, I think, after the election day, that would be, I think the technical difficulty's gone.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I can't go in more detail.
Got it. That's understood.
But we're bound by our closed session
stuff.
You all can imagine what I'm dealing with there.
We understand. And I've got a couple more questions, but I want to turn to Director Jennings because his hand is raised.
Thank you very much. Make sure I'm on. Okay, thank you very much. I too want to thank James and his entire staff for the work that went into this. It was a tremendous amount of work, especially, having some new people at the table with us who did an excellent job. I'm speaking to the attorney at this time, who did an excellent job of helping us to navigate through this. And I also want to thank the 7 SACOG leaders, leaders of committees, leaders of their jurisdictions, who worked with us to help put together an MOU that we felt was very important for SACOG and for the region. And they put in a tremendous amount of hours as well in all of this. I ask myself the question all the time, had we not been at the table, had we not been able to put together this kind of an MOU, what would happen to the region as it relates to greenhouse gas reduction and mitigation? And so now that we're at the table in a good position of control, I just am very happy that SACOG is the organization that will rule on most of these situations that come before us. So I was very happy with the work that James and his staff did. I was very happy with the MOU. We've got a couple of more steps that need to take place as we finish off this strategy. But I am convinced that we're all working together to make a better Sacramento region.
Thank you, Rick. And thanks for your leadership. And Rick, Mr. Desmond, you had your hand up, I think. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, very briefly, I'll just underscore Director Jennings and Director Sanders' comments. I also want to thank James. I know it's been difficult and a lot of work for him and staff. So thank you, James. I too appreciate all the conversations you and I have had over the last few months. And, you know, we had a long conversation about this at the STA board last week. And I think this structure is a good one to ensure a way to collaboratively work through any issues as they arise. And I also, you know, I have a great deal of faith in my fellow SACOG board members, but also have a great deal of faith in my fellow STA board members as well, that they will also be looking out for our not only our county's interest, but our region's interest in making sure that we don't jeopardize any funding that we would otherwise be eligible for in this region. So thank you all again, and Director Jennings and everybody else who was involved in sitting at the table.
Very good. Thank you, Rick. Any other comments or questions on this item? Jay, you look ready to say something, but maybe that's just a misunderstanding on my part. Facial expressions are not the microphone. So I do have just a couple of other topics, James, to ask about. This process for projects not in the MTP SCS, page 3 of the MOU. It talks about a study that, and the partnership that Rich has just referenced between STA and SACOG, and that you yourself have talked about in a very positive terms. That sounds like a very good approach and kind of groundbreaking for us. My question is, when SACOG does this study, do you anticipate that it'll come through the same kind of process that our other actions and decisions are proceeding? So it's committee review, board approval of the study. I know you've got some work to do to work out the implementation steps, but I'm hoping that would just, I was assuming that would happen in the normal course of business. What's your sense of that?
My sense, Director Saylor, Chair Saylor, given involvement and interest over the last 6 weeks from board members, is the board will be very involved in this. The development of it, the checking in, the whole oversight of it, absolutely. I think here's the thing that I would say to you, per the partnership that you mentioned with STA, and a lot of our work in early July was really working with STA, Executive Director Kevin Busey, General Counsel. What I propose right now, and I'm happy to answer any of the specific questions about how this works, you know, who sees it, involvement of the specifics around implementation. What we want to do now that we have the MOU executed, and we have a few last steps here, as Director Jennings said, that are crucial, is that we work with STA on an implementation plan. We work on that starting now. We've been talking and speaking internally, but we develop something, we bring it back to you in terms of scope, schedule, budget, all the questions I think are inherent in your comment just now, and we put that in front of you, and that you sign off on that you approve it. That would be my, rather than suggest any specifics, because I just want to make sure I'm working with STA. It's a good faith effort here, but we'll be back in front of you.
Okay, well then my hope and assumption is that, as with everything we do as a board, as an organization, that the board would approve key decisions on this topic. So as you're working on that implementation strategy, I hope I know you'll be mindful of that.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. And the topic of the MTP SCS, the 2024 blueprint, there's a potential change in schedule for that.
Yep.
What's your anticipation of how that comes to us to inform us of that change?
Yeah, very soon, maybe the next committee cycle, I'll have to get back in touch with staff. Okay. There were a number of issues anyway that made us look at a couple of month delay. So we're managing that. I want to come back with a proposal to you in terms of what that schedule looks like. It will, because I know the board's interested in this, by the way, the pathways that we've talked about. So the additional sort of growth scenarios, trying to put something out, again, true to the name and the brand of the blueprint. I actually think it's going to be helpful because what we're looking at now is trying to really get that out early next calendar year, which I do think is a good time to actually get out and circulate and have all of you, right, weigh in and invite us to your jurisdictions and connect us with your constituents and really have a robust discussion with the region about the future and the choices we have in front of us. And I think that is actually very appropriately done early next calendar year.
Okay, thank you, James. So as several have said, this is an informational topic to share with all members of the board through our committee cycle, the status of this very significant effort, and I'm heartened by James's presentation today, and a couple of takeaways for me are that one of the key projects that's been a lot on a lot of our minds and for years and has been discussed as a part of this measure is included in the MOU considerations, and it is included because the connector is a project sponsor, and even though the connector JPA will receive an allocation, that allocation will only be provided contingent upon the planning activity that STA will approve, the identification of greenhouse gas impacts and the overall mitigation plan. So with that, I think we have a good piece of work. I think those are clear statements that have been made today, and it's critically important to me, and I think to the region, that those elements of this MOU are clear, articulated, and ever present in our work. And with that, I appreciate all the comments from everyone. So that brings us, unless there's anything else on this, to item 11, which is the blueprint draft pathways, land use assumptions. And Mr. Caden is with us.
All right, good morning, committee members. So this is an information item to provide you an update on the 2024 blueprint land use assumptions for the 3 pathways to 2050. The board will use these pathways to better understand how the land use and transportation decisions that we make affect our future and affect the ability of the region to hit our regional goals and achieve the triple bottom line. Of course, the blueprint pathways and eventually our adopted plan are going to include a whole suite of land use, transportation, policy components. But for today's presentation, we're focusing in on land use. And I know it's sometimes easy to think of the blueprints as a transportation plan. We're in transportation committee. There's transportation in the title of the plan, of course. But the performance of the plan is largely dependent on land use. So thinking back to the triple bottom line framework, we simply won't be able to effectively make inroads on these goals without meaningfully tackling land use and being really strategic about how and where we grow. So for example, to further equity, we need to keep our region affordable, which requires more smaller lot, more multifamily housing near jobs and services. To foster economic prosperity, we need to minimize how much time people are spending getting to and from their destinations, maintain strong fiscal health through efficient use of our existing infrastructure. We know we maximize our environmental goals when growth is focused in existing communities where jobs and services already exist, and at densities that support those shorter vehicle trips, but also support and make more viable taking transit and making walking and biking choices. And in fact, the majority of the performance, including the greenhouse gas reductions in our adopted plan, can be attributable to smart land use. So what does SACOG actually do as part of making land use assumptions in the pathways? Well, we start with our regional growth projections, which the board adopted in February. These projections said that our region will grow by 263,000 jobs, 278,000 homes by 2050. It's about a 30% increase over today's numbers. We then go through this process of deciding where that growth will go as a part of the assumption. So first down to the community type level, which I'll get into in a little bit, and then eventually all the way down to the parcel level for our travel model to operate. How do we make those decisions? So attachment A in your packets describes in much more detail the regulatory, market, and performance factors that we consider in developing our land use assumptions. The foundation of those assumptions is that left column there, your local plans and entitlements. So every 4 years, we catalog what we call the build-out inventory to understand what's allowed by your general plans, your specific plans, your zoning, and all of that forms the basis for our regional land use scenarios. We actually received a grant from Caltrans this cycle to do a comprehensive update to our build-out inventory as a part of this plan cycle. And a key finding out of that analysis is that if you were to just add up all of the planned growth across the region, just stapling together general plans and specific plans, you end up seeing significantly more capacity than what we're expecting to happen by 2050 in those regional growth projections. So we have to make choices inherently as to which growth to include where. We also build into our assumptions a variety of market factors that really seek to approximate things like financial feasibility of projects, whether there's a strong demand for that type of project in that part of the region. And then critically, we have a whole set of policy and performance considerations that we've organized into the triple bottom line framework for this plan. And again, those choices that we make as a region around where and how we grow have monumental implications for the policy goals that we have as part of this plan. So just to recap, we have a regional number of units and jobs we need to distribute. It's way less than what we have already sort of planned for at the local level. We want to keep those assumptions achievable by using those regulatory and market factors, but at the same time, we want to be visionary and strive to accomplish our triple bottom line goals. It's a complicated puzzle, right? And so in an effort to inform the board's deliberative process on this and help to try to solve this puzzle, SACOG is undertaking a scenario planning effort called Pathways. These pathways are going to explore distinct land use and transportation futures that are going to serve as a learning tool for unpacking all of the complexities and the intersecting issues that we're facing over the next 3 decades. So just to be clear, the pathways are not a menu from which the board are just going to pick one of these pathways as the preferred scenario. They're more about providing an opportunity to learn, to discuss policy choices, some of the regional strategies we can take, and some of the trade-offs between those choices. For about 15 years, we've used this idea of community types as a geographic framing tool for talking about regional growth. So these community types are detailed in the beginning of attachment B in your packets, and they divide the region up into these different categories. So first, our core, what we call centers and corridors, are in red. Those are places near transit, near jobs, main streets, corridors, downtowns, places that we're expecting lots of changes. Our established communities are in gray. Those are sort of places that are already, they already exist for the most part, but we're not expecting dramatic changes in urban form. And then potential developing communities in purple, these are places where the region could expand into based on local sort of plans that have outlined or at least proposed plans. And then rural residential areas in yellow. And an even simpler version of this map is to just combine our red and gray areas and look at where are our existing communities today. So these are places that we already have a critical mass of homes and jobs where backbone infrastructure is largely already built, right? So when we think about our 3 pathways, one way to think about how compact or how spread out the growth is in the pathway is to just measure what percentage of new jobs or new housing units are within these green existing communities. Here are the 3 pathways that we're exploring. These were created using the factors we described earlier, as well as the feedback from the SACOG board on the pathway framework that you all saw back in March. The detailed land use assumptions by pathway are summarized in that huge table in attachment B. I apologize for it being a little bit clunky. It's hard to fit all of the numbers into a PDF, but this is sort of the high level summary that you see on the screen. And an easy way to think about the pathways, at least on the land use side, is that they go from dispersed development patterns on the left to really compact patterns on the right. So think 2000 to 2008 type growth in pathway 1, with only about 40% of our new housing happening in those existing communities. Most of that growth is large lot single family homes. And then pathway 2 is intended to reflect the development pattern of our adopted 2020 MTP SES. And it gives us, or will give us, an answer to this question: what happens to performance if we use the development pattern from our adopted plan, but then we update it with what's happened in the last 4 years? We base it on the new regional growth projections. But we maintain the general proportion of growth. So this assumption in the last plan of 2/3 of new housing being in existing communities is held constant for pathway 2. And then pathway 3, or inward expansion, we're calling it, is the opposite bookend. And it really looks to explore a future where the vast majority of our growth is denser housing products, small lot, single family, but also a lot of multifamily housing. And then the vast majority of growth is happening in those existing communities. The regional growth projections remain constant across all 3 of the pathways. We're not varying the amount of growth across the region. But as you can see, we're really trying to explore some fairly divergent futures for where that growth occurs and how much of it is happening in our existing footprint. You can also think of these pathways as an articulation of local land use policies on the ground. So jurisdictions with large amounts of planned developing communities growth are likely going to see more growth in pathway 1 than they will in pathway 3. And then conversely, jurisdictions, generally speaking, right, with more compact capacity planned within their existing footprint would likely see more growth in pathway 3 than in pathway 1. By exploring these land use bookends, we're going to have a much better picture of what kind of future is best serving our regional goals and the triple bottom line. And we actually are going to have a whole suite of performance metrics for each of these triple bottom line goals. And so you'll be able to see and compare in a quantitative way the performance of these different pathways. So we've been working on these land use assumptions for the better part of the year. We did vet a version of the pathways, the detailed spreadsheet with your staff back in April. And based on that feedback, revised the assumptions into the version that you see in attachment B. So this is already a revised version. In terms of next steps, we're in the process right now of taking that detailed spreadsheet and modeling the 3 pathways at the parcel level, which is quite the undertaking. You can expect a presentation of the results of that modeling, as James mentioned in the last item, in the early part of 2023 is what we're targeting right now. So in that presentation early next year, we'll be asking for your feedback on which performance metrics you want to prioritize. We'll be using feedback from you all, of course, as well as the general public and through workshops to develop a single draft preferred scenario that will eventually make it into the adopted plan. And again, that preferred scenario will synthesize aspects of the different pathways. The intent is to draw out the best performing components once we have a better sense. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. I know that was a ton of information. I'm happy to answer any questions or clarifications you have. I also have Clint Holtzen, our planning manager, on the line too.
Thank you very much, Dov. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee?
Branscombe has a question.
Yes, please, Chris.
Thanks, Chair. I looked all through the materials you provided, but I didn't see that PowerPoint. And the PowerPoint looks like a pretty important piece of information. Can you get that to us?
Absolutely. Yeah, we can send that out right after the meeting.
I'm surprised it wasn't part of the package. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others? Okay, we had a wonderful presentation from Mr. Corliss at the Yolo County Board of Supervisors meeting. I think he used us as a test case, a guinea pig on how these presentations will go. I think it went very well. It was excited people. My colleagues on the Yolo County Board were very interested. They had several different questions and comments. So I think it's a good way to engage and as these engage our colleagues from around the region. So I hope you all get your folks ready because he's coming. So thank you. With nothing else, we'll move on to item 12. And this is James on the strategic planning update.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Saylor. And I hope you had a chance to read this last but not least information item. Just a few reminders to the board, and this is a sort of a stopping point in the update of the agency strategic plan. So I want to say a few things, especially for those of you that either couldn't make the board retreat in April or aren't on the strategic planning committee. Our agency strategic plan was last updated in 2010. So we're looking at something that's 12 years old. I would say that we've actually been doing strategic planning piece by piece, sort of iteratively since, well, maybe when I joined 5 years ago. And many of you who were at the board retreats, the SACOG board retreats in 2017, in Sacramento in 2019, in Rancho, and just this past spring, this April, know that we've really been dipping into this and coming back out. So what I want to say, having said all that, is that we are not starting from scratch. So what we are trying to do is update key pieces of our strategic plan. If you can stay for over the noon hour as an extension of this committee meeting, we will have Daniel Kaufman, who's our consultant from Third Plateau, who's been helping us update the strategic plan. Daniel did a lot of interviews of board members, interviews of partner agencies in the spring. And I'm going to be, he and I are going to be tag teaming the presentation over the noon hour to get a little bit more, do a bit of a deeper dive. In terms of the pieces and the components of a strategic plan, we actually don't have a vision statement, which we think is really important to actually have a vision statement for the agency. What's our long-term vision? What are we trying to strive for? And we have a mission statement from our 2010 strategic plan, but frankly, I cannot remember it. And I think that's a great test of if I can't remember the mission statement because it's too long, it's not a good mission statement. So we worked actually with our SACOG staff the last couple of months. We did a couple of exercises and some breakout groups. And I wanted to just in your packet, throw out a couple of options here. There was one vision statement that we kind of settled on that we really liked. 3 different versions of a sort of a similar mission statement that I've got in front of you. Before I ask for feedback on those, I've just got them up on the screen. Let me just tell you a little bit more. I'm sure you're wondering about kind of process. So this is a stopping point. If you can stay or come early, if you're on the land use committee for the lunch, we're going to do a deeper dive into this. We are going to go to the strategic planning committee Monday, August 29th with a draft of an updated strategic plan that will have these elements. That will then go as information items into your September committees, the longer draft of the strategic plan, and then it will, we hope, go to the full board for adoption in October. Just like a mission statement, my hope is that a strategic plan is going to be brief. It's going to solidify, I think, a lot of the direction that we're already on. It's going to articulate, I think, in a way that is meaningful and impactful. And so again, hoping that we can drive towards a draft plan update, discussion at your board, your committee meetings in September, a deeper dive from the Strategic Planning Committee, August 29th, more feedback on that, more feedback from your city and county staff and our partner agencies and our staff. And then we're going to come back to you in October with a proposal for an update of the strategic plan. So with that, and you may well have questions of, but I want to at least throw these out and give you a little bit of sort of the, the peek behind the curtain about some vision statement, mission statements. I'm happy to get any thoughts and feedback on these. I will absolutely, I want to just like state for the record, I know these things are hard. It's very hard to write short. It's very hard to write concise. And so we're trying to aim to something that is short and concise, and memorable, and that we can all kind of, it rolls off the tongue. So we're not saying we've hit the mark completely, but I do think there's a lot of effort here put in by the staff and by us. And a lot of these reflect, and again, over lunch, I'm going to go a little bit deeper into what you all told us, what we heard in some of the interviews and the board retreat and other venues. But for now, just wanted to see if you had any questions on the process, general comments, or specific feedback on where we stand on the vision and mission.
Chair, this is Director Bradford. I'm not sure if we're looking to delve into this detail or not yet, James, but I certainly really like options 1 and option 2. And when I read them, just for me personally, and I'm sure you could get 22 different feedback on this, but you know, in my mind, we could combine those two into something that really, for me personally, resonates. You know, something like I like brings together as opposed to convenes and connects, just personally. But then I kind of like the rest of option 1 and then some of option 2. So maybe something like SACOG brings the region together, you know, for, you know, something, you know, equitable, sustainable, and prosperous future. So anyway, just some initial feedback from reading it. And the words in the middle there, I didn't really specify, but I think this really captures, you know, really all 3 capture, right, what our focus and our goal is, and triple bottom line, and, you know, regional collaboration. So thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Other comments? I think Rich Lozano has his hand up.
I do. Thank you all. I like what Gary said. My initial thought was, and again, I don't know if we're diving into this now, but just my initial thought was number 2, and instead of just addressing systemic challenges, also addressing opportunities. So maybe challenges and opportunities to advance. That's just kind of my thought. So.
Great. Thank you.
Other comments? And James, is this the kind of interaction you were hoping to?
It was great. Yeah, we're doing a temperature check, right? And so this is super helpful. Again, we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive over lunch, and the strategic planning committee will get into. But yeah, great early feedback.
This is the tease. This is the trailer.
That's right. If you want to see the full movie, stay tuned.
All right. Very good. And I think anybody, if you have some additional thoughts, you can forward them to James. And
please do.
Okay. Very good. So that brings us to other matters.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Eric.
We do have an update on funding opportunities, and so I'd like to ask Chris Doherty to present an update to remind all of you of the funding opportunities coming.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Lynette, can you put up the slide that I sent you? Just want to give a brief update on our funding, on several funding programs that we're moving forward over the next year. We'll start off with our regional program and community design. I'll wait for the graphic to get up.
Pretty exciting so far.
Thank you, Lynette. So the slide in front of you shows the 4 programs that we're moving forward. There are other programs under SACOG's purview, but these are the transportation projects that or programs that we're moving forward for funding. Most importantly, I'll start off from the top and go bottom. For the regional program and community design, we are anticipating that we will be bringing guidelines for discussion and adoption to the committee and to the board in September and October, ideally for an October adoption and late October, early November call for projects. We're anticipating their applications due the end of February, the end of January, the beginning of February. And then we'll go through our process internally to review those projects. I think last funding round we had over 70 applications. So there's a fair amount of work there, but we're shooting for an award, either adopting of staff recommendations in May or possibly June of 2023. So we're out doing the one-on-one meetings with our jurisdictions right now. That were so for your staff, we've been contacting and doing those meetings, talking about our funding programs and what your local priorities are to move forward and offering advice. So we've been doing those, and we'll be doing those all the way through August. For the Innovative Mobility Program, we're looking, you'll be seeing a set of guidelines coming through this committee and to the board in September, with then a call for projects with those applications due November. Ideally looking to December or January for an award for those programs. This is similar to that program that we have run, I think, now for a couple different cycles. The new program, the Engage, Empower, and Implement. This is the program that really seeks to address equity and path for projects throughout our region. Most importantly here, Rosie Ramos, who's running that program, is kicking off that program framework with a stakeholder group next month. And that will go through November. That will really craft what that call for projects and application deadline and award will look like. That's why those are listed as TBD. But we're looking at that just general time frame of kind of winter through summer to develop those projects and those awards. And for the Regional Active Transportation Program, I think James has some announcement on that as well, but that it's in the field now. We did a call for projects in June. We have applications that are going to be due in September. We're looking towards an April award for those. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks. Are there questions, colleagues? It looks like it's a pretty, we've got some pretty ambitious opportunities coming up in the next few months. And I think this would be good to keep this in front of the committee so that we can just always know where we're at. I think transparency is our friend in these timelines, and make sure nobody is taken by surprise. So I really appreciate it. And this is a good way to do it. Are there any other matters from James? Anything further that you'd like to share?
I think I'm good, Chair Saylor.
All right, colleagues, if there's nothing else, we can stand adjourned. All right, we are, and I'm not able to join the strategic planning conversation at lunchtime, but I hope some of you are, and then we'll keep this process flowing. Good meeting today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
And we're done.